Hey, you found us again. No stoplights. We do podcast with political people, political figures. One of my great passions in life, one of my, I guess I would call myself a glutton for punishment, is my love, almost irrational love of Gamecock football. So when we had a podcast studio constructed, I had some buddies of mine very involved in Garnet Trust. I had another buddy of mine, Rick Havocost, and Mickey Fins, who I knew shared my irrational passion for Gamecock football. Went to Rick and said, hey, I need you to help me launch a podcast separate of No Stoplights, but kind of half pregnant with No Stoplights. I understand you can't be half pregnant. Well, in today's world, who knows? There may be such a thing as half pregnant. Since there are more than two genders, I'll leave the politics out of this. But anyway, went to Rick. Rick agreed to be our sponsor for Garnet Trust. Garnet Trust is the NIL collective of the University of South Carolina. Rick Havocost is very involved in Garnet Trust. I'm very involved in Garnet Trust, but not as involved as our next two guests. We're going to do this kind of one at a time because I think these guys share different responsibilities at Garnet Trust. But very seldom, back to Mickey Fins, very seldom do you go to a place and get the widest variety, the best selection at the best price. I mean, if you're a consumer of alcohol or anything for that matter, you normally have to go to a certain place and pay a little more for the premiums, go to another place to get the Joe six-pack, literally and figuratively. Rick's done a good job of figuring out a way to offer the widest variety, some of the upscale choices, along with some of the Joe six-pack choices at the best prices. Mickey Fins, I guess, is the official libation provider for the University of South Carolina. So when Rick Havocost agreed to be our sponsor, Mickey Fins, on behalf of Rick Havocost, agreed to be our sponsor. We decided that once a month, we're going to do a Garnet Trust podcast. And we're going to talk about the current state of college football. And you can't talk about the current state of college football without talking about NIL. I know the other universities have NILs. I know some are underperforming, some are overperforming. I don't much care. I mean, the Gamecocks are my team. It's Rick's team. So I want to introduce Jeremy Smith, who is Director of Operations for Garnet Trust, and I want him to thank, along with me, Rick Havocost and Mickey Fins.
Absolutely. Thank you, Rick, for all that you do for the Garnet Trust, and Mickey Fins for the wide selection of beverages that you have for the fans to enjoy. I can't wait to stop by there on my way out of town.
Jeremy, I hear this every day, and I'm sure you do as well. I don't like this damn NIL. I don't like this collective. They're ruining college football. Explain to the college football fan what exactly you do day by day, making sure the University of South Carolina's football and athletic programs in general remain competitive.
Right. No, well, first and foremost, I don't like it either. I don't think it's. I don't think it is working the way that it was intended. I think there needs to be some changes, but we're here, and we can't put our head in the sand and hope it goes away. We got to make the best of it, and so that's what we're here to do. And my responsibilities on a day-to-day basis is working with the athletes and helping them fulfill their deliverables. They have to work for the money that they get. It's not just given to them and they go off into the sunset. They have to actually do jobs for us. That job might be working inside a charity, helping them gain more exposure so that their donors rise the money for them. It might be working, doing a fan event, signing autographs for some fans, being engaging to the fans, being more exposed to the fans that sit in the stadium and cheer for them every single day. So I deal a good part of that. I also work with the coaches to make sure that what we're doing aligns with what their values are. And then I also just do a lot of just the general operational stuff to make sure the payers get paid when they're supposed to, make sure that they have the education that they are supposed to have, to make sure they manage the money the best way they can. And so that's what I primarily do on a daily basis.
Jeremy, the best part of your job is you are not an official representative, but you are in some way, shape, or form a representative of Gamecock football. The Gamecocks are in the SEC.
Right.
That cuts both ways. The good part of that is you're on television all the time. You play the best programs in America. The bad part of that is you're competing against programs that have tradition and generational commitments to football. I'm arguing, and I want to get your take on this, that this is a reset in college football. This is a chance for Gamecock Nation, I don't want to say to catch up, but to embrace this new model. We don't have the generational success. We don't have the tradition of an Alabama or an LSU or a Tennessee, but we do have the same starting blocks that they do today. Is that a fair and accurate representation? And what is it that the Gamecock Nation needs to do to help us be successful in this new model that you know I like?
Yeah, no, absolutely. We are. We're on an even playing field to some degree. I think we are a year behind a lot of the other collectives in what's been going on, but I think we have the ability to catch up quickly, to be more sound in our direction to this. I mean, we always talk about this in the office. We have one of the best fan bases in the country. That stadium has sold out, has been almost filled for almost every game since I was a young boy. Who wants to go to a game and watch us lose when they probably spent $100, $200, $300, some more that have the box seats? Who wants to go to that game if we're a 3-9 team? No one. No one's going to want to do that. So if you could give an extra $10 a month to get a better team out there, then that's what needs to happen. I mean, it just doesn't make sense. If you're going to spend 100, what's 120 do for you? And I think that the one of the things that our fan base is kind of hesitant on, and I get this, there's no hard feelings, is they don't like the idea that we pay these players. But the money that's generated from their exposure on TV is unbelievable. And these salaries that coaches and athletic departments have are benefiting from the play that these players are doing on the field, on the court. And we just need to buck up and do what's right and give them a share of the prize.
Jeremy, at the beginning, some of the reports I read, not just at South Carolina, across America, were that the universities and those responsible for funding the programs felt that you were somewhat of a competitor. Have we improved the relationship? I mean, you can't speak to what Ohio State does or what Texas does or what Southern California, but at the University of South Carolina, is there more compatibility within Garnet Trust, the NIL, the collective, and the officialdom known as the University of South Carolina Athletics Department?
Absolutely. I think, it was later in 23 that we kind of got to that point. But let's call it from August through December, we were very involved in meetings on a weekly basis with the athletic department. We constantly were communicating with them on what we were doing and what they were doing to help support us. And I think we've made a lot of strides. Could it be better? Obviously. Anytime we're in a situation like this, we always look for a way to better ourselves and so forth. But it has gone from 0 to 100 from January to August 100 to December, which has been helpful. But we're in a new year. Things have changed in 30 days. We have to be able to compete with our competitors. And it's going to take a lot of work on both our part and the athletics department's part.
Take us behind the scenes, if you will. You could do this better than anybody I know. One of the great examples of success in the NIL at South Carolina was Spencer Rattler. Shows up from Oklahoma. We were told he was a high-maintenance, troubling kid. We make an NIL offer. He accepts the NIL offer. He plays his, junior year. It would have been he's eligible, I think, to play one more if he chose to, but he's not. He's going on to the pros, and we wish him well. But when, where, how does Garnet Trust show up in a negotiation with Spencer Rattler? Disclose as much of that interaction as you're comfortable with.
Yeah, well, first and foremost, he was awesome. And I'm really sad to see him leave, not for his talents on the field, but just for him as a human being. He's made me a better person. I'm 48 years old. I think he demonstrates anything that we should strive for as a student athlete at University of South Carolina. So that's one thing I'm going to miss dearly about him. But he had a chance to go into the pros last year. And it ultimately came down to being a business decision, and I get that. He goes out and gets his grade from the NFL of where he might fall in the draft and gets some sort of an idea that if he went pro, he'd be worth this amount of money. And then ultimately, his heart wanted to stay one more year. He felt like he had something more to prove, felt like he could improve his draft status. So I worked with his agent, and we just literally negotiated just like his agent would work with an NFL team or whatnot. And so we went back and forth a few times, and we conceded on some things, they conceded on some things, and we got to a place where we both felt comfortable. And they presented it to Spencer, and we were able to close the deal.
Tell me some things that Spencer did for the university that the casual and average fan would not know.
He spent a lot of times with Charities. He did a lot to help, again, boost their visibility to the community.
And there's an accounting. I'm sorry to interrupt you. There's a Garnet Trust accounting of what he gets and what he owes. Is that fair?
That's correct. Yeah. We had a list of, he owed us hours. So last year we set up a number of hours that he had to give us, and we could have him do stuff with charities. We could have him do stuff with fans, with donors. The stuff he did from charities came from the Garnet Trust Foundation, which is our 501c3, and the stuff that was done for the donors and for the fans, that came from the Garnet Trust, which is an LLC.
College football historically has revolved or centered around the culture of the program. Can the coach development quality players and upperclassmen to contribute mightily? We've all of a sudden got this phenomenon called money. Mm-hmm. And, that there's a scripture. We can get biblical about the love of money.
That's right.
But the reality is, at times, kids find themselves in a situation that they can't be as obligated to the culture, the tradition of the program. Money does come into play. How do we make the decision, the commitment that Garnet Trust makes financing a kid's college career? Walk me through, or walk our viewers through, some of the processes or steps, the interaction between the university, the coaching staff, the kid, the parent, the guardian, whomever makes that deal. As much of that as you're willing to share, what does that entail?
A lot of conversations. We really do ask and lean on the coaches to kind of give us a roadmap. The last thing we want to do is the hard-earned money that our donors give us to ultimately give back to these student athletes through their work. We want to make sure it's spent wisely. We don't want to give it to a student athlete who might be a disruption in the locker room or in the classroom, more importantly, doesn't go to class, things like that. They're not the type of individual we want to work with. And we really want to work with players who are looking at this as a long-term investment. Not all players take the money and do what we want with it, but I mean, any company gives a paycheck to their employees for the hard work. They can spend it how they want, but we try to guide them and educate them to make sure that they take this money and figure out a way to invest it for their future. Because a lot of these young men and women come from underserved communities, and this might be a big part for them and their family. And if they invest it properly and they save it properly, this could set them up for a huge success down the road.
So who decides? I mean, I would imagine there are a lot of forces. It's almost like the perfect storm that consolidates around this particular kid. But who makes the ultimate decision that this is a wise investment for Garnet Trust and the University of South Carolina?
Mark and I ultimately make that final decision, but we do lean on our board and the owners of Garnet Trust and consult with them to make sure that they agree with what we're doing. We don't just make a decision blindly. We ask for people's reactions to it, and it's good to have that dialogue and have that sometimes conversation that is not what they think we should do, and it brings us back to the center and allows us to make a wiser decision.
And Jeremy, we're not the only ones. I hate to say it this way, but it is what it is. We're not the only ones doling out cash. I mean, you got a lot of other competitors. You got that bunch of the upstate. They're doing their thing. Across the state line, Georgia's doing their thing. Florida. The transfer portal seems to be what a lot of college football fans have enormous trouble with. A kid looks to be committed to your program until he ain't.
Right.
And we found out, that, hey, Florida made him a better offer. Georgia made him a better deal. Is that frustrating day to day when you are negotiating with a Gamecock player and you find out the next day or 2 or 3 later, he's not a Gamecock or doesn't want to be in a Gamecock? Is that just the reality of where we are?
First, it is very frustrating. And secondly, yes, it's where we are. Because of the current rules, or lack of rules, I should say, in NIL space, a lot of this is hearsay. A lot of times we hear through the grapevine that a university has told a player, hey, we will pay you this. And that number is just to get them on campus, because they feel like that player would not come to them unless the money was big enough. They get them on campus, they evaluate them to decide if they're the player they really want to keep, and then they kind of renegotiate that amount. We've never done that. We never say what the money's going to be. We want them to commit here because this is where they want to be. Now, the transfer portal has definitely caused a lot of heartburn in this new world, because players that traditionally in the past left school, they had to sit out a year. And depending on where you were in your college career, sitting out a year might be very hurtful to the overall, success that you're looking to have. Now you can go to a different school. Unfortunately, you can go to a different school every time the portal opens. It's very difficult. But there's a lot of reasons why the players are going into the portal now, and it's not, a lot of it is not NIL related.
You've told me on multiple occasions that you don't want Garnet Trust to be perceived as an ATM machine. You believe the best collectives in the future will be those that cultivate a relationship with a kid, his family, his advisor, his agent, whomever he trusts to give good advice. Why do you think that matters? I mean, in other words, the kid. I mean, let's be honest. I mean, in the weirdest way imaginable, we're figuring out a way to compensate a kid for athletic performance. I mean, I understand NIL, name, image, likeness. I get the law and the legalities and whatnot. But you, and I think you're on to something here, Jeremy, when you say that you don't want the player at the University of South Carolina to simply look at Jeremy and Mark as, hey, that's the guy with the check. You know, that's the guy that brings me my money when it's time. You believe cultivating a relationship is important. Why?
I believe it. At the end of the day, I think it saves us money. I mean, that's just the God's honest truth. But the reason we want to do that is because it's important for them to see the hard work that Mark and I put in, but all the donors and all the sacrifices the donors make to make what we do successful. If the player had a more insight to that and built a relationship with the Garnet Trust on a personal level, I think they would be more likely to. I wouldn't say take less money, because it's not really, again, all about the money with them, but I think it would help at least show them that there's a lot of people involved to make this happen for them. It is not us. We are just the middleman. We're just the ones who are getting the money from the donors, and and the players are earning it. But we really believe that if they understood that better, they would probably be a little bit more humbled at some of the things that they're getting.
Do you buy into my notion or my theory that had the NCAA been willing to give a little along, they would have never been forced to give the farm away, so to speak? My argument, Jeremy, is the player went from having no leverage to probably too much leverage, and we're hopeful that there will be some place of equilibrium sooner or later. Is the NIL era of college football a result of the NCAA wanting too much control, too much manipulation of college football?
Well, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, with the TV revenue that these schools are getting from each conference, and for us on the ESPN ABC side, and these players are the ones who are making the tackles, scoring the touchdowns, making the baskets, hitting the home runs, making the outs, whatever it may be,
generating the revenue.
That's right. And and then all they're seeing is these coaches' salaries go through the roof, and these athletic departments and their budgets going through the roof. And yes, that brings some good stuff to it, but they're left out in the cold. And I think when the NCAA, got pushback on that and they got sued by that, the wheels started to come off. And they kind of pretended, in my opinion only, but I feel like they kind of pretended like they were above the law. They made the rules. They could do whatever they wanted to do. And it hurt the young men and women who are out there busting their butts every day to show to have a good product on the quarter field.
You've been here how long?
I've been July of 22 is when I joined the Garnet Trust.
So Jeremy's from where and was doing what before? I guess I can say we plucked you and put you in this place.
So I originally am from Columbia, and my family around middle school moved down to Florida, and I've been in Florida in Orlando for quite a long time. And my family's all still here in Columbia. But I owned a executive recruiting company. Before that, I was in marketing and national director of marketing for an antivirus software company. So I worked in kind of that sales marketing for the last 25 years. And when this opportunity came available, it was a chance for me to come home. It was a chance for me to give back to the university that I love so dearly, because I'm unfortunately the only one in my family not to go to Carolina. So this is kind of me paying them back for all the years of excitement I've been able to have being a fan. And it was just the perfect opportunity.
Jeremy, I've heard it said, I think Mark says this better than I will, I can't guarantee you that supporting Garnet Trust will lead to championships. I mean, nobody can make that guarantee. I can assure you, if we don't raise ample money and don't have competitive resources, losing will be very common. Is that fair?
No, absolutely. No doubt about it. I mean, we can't foretell the future. I mean, injuries happen, things of that nature. But if we just kind of turn our nose up at it and we don't raise the funds needed to support the NIL at the University of South Carolina, it will be a very, very tough place to enjoy watching sports.
How much better are we today than we were the day you got here?
I can't even put a percentage on it because it has too many zeros. But it's been amazing. I mean, to be completely honest, I think, and Mark can probably talk to this a little bit better, I think we are over 10 times the revenue, if you will, or the donations coming into Carolina that we were in 22.
What do you tell, and this will be my last question, I'll get to Mark here in a second. What do you tell the donor and non-donor? I mean, there are people out there with a lot of money. There are people out there who don't have a lot of money, but they love Gamecock football. Why does that $10 a month, $20 a month, $25 a month? I mean, naturally, we believe you go to the wealthiest supporters of University of South Carolina athletics, but there are many, many, many more people out there that can't write a check for $100,000 or $1 million, can't get a name on a building. What do you tell the casual? I call them Joe Sixpack. We touched on that at the beginning. Why is it important if that fan becomes a shareholder in Garnet Trust?
Not to get political, Bernie Sanders did a pretty darn good job of it running for president. And that was the six-pack Joes, and a lot of them giving a little bit of money, and a lot of a little becomes a lot. And I think people just automatically think, well, you know, $10 isn't going to move the needle. Yeah, if you're the only $10 donor. But if we have 100,000 $10 donors, you know, what does that do? I think we are starting to see that. We did a $1 million match campaign. We had a donor who was willing to give us $1 million if we were to raise $1 million, and we started it basically at the end of November, and we hit it. I mean, and it was a lot of those small dollar donations that put us over the top.
Last question. What excites you most about doing the job you do?
Truthfully, I really like to get to know these players. Some of them, I know I talked earlier about, you know, building a deeper relationship. Some I have built a deeper relationship with, and it does change your view of them. You hurt for them when they're not on the field being successful. It's not the typical fan that sits back and just starts, you know, you stink. I feel for them because I see the work they put in, and they grind really hard. The Division I athletes are literally spending 40 hours a week, just shy under 40, within their sport. Then they have school on top of that. And on top of that, now they have to do NIL stuff. So they have very little free time if they want to participate in the NIL space, but they work hard. And to see some of the things that these young men and women have done with the money that they have earned is unbelievable. I use DeCarrion Joyner as an example. DeCarrion grinded, and he worked hard, and he was loyal to the state of South Carolina, and more so the University of South Carolina. And he will be set up for a future. We want to make sure that we spread what he did and have him even work with us to make sure the other athletes at the University of South Carolina understand that if you are an in-state product and you devote your 4 years or 5 years, depending on the sport, to the University of South Carolina, the state of South Carolina is going to take care of you. And I was talking to Tory Gurley yesterday. He came from New Hampshire down to South Carolina, and he said, it by no means – I am set for life. He's in Charlotte, and he's doing very well in Charlotte. It's because what he gave back to the university and their fans, he is now set for the rest of his life. He will always have food on his table. He will always have a roof over his head. And I think a lot of the players are short-sighted, and they don't see that. They see dollar signs in the short term, but there's a lot more value in staying home and being loyal.
And it's an ongoing educational process. Some of the players and universities are learning. You're learning as well.
I'm learning a ton. Yes, absolutely. I mean, the education for me is just as important as it is for the players. But I think we have a good thing going here. I think to your point, we are at a point where we could really take a giant leap forward. And it doesn't mean we have to have the most money, but we could take a giant leap forward, and we could stop being the afterthought in the SEC. We want to be one of those teams that players desperately want to come to. We want to be one of those teams that has trophies in their trophy case, and NIL is a component of that today, like it or not. Like how it's structured, I don't, but it is where it is. We have that opportunity. We need to take advantage of that now, or sit back and watch it all fall apart.
Yeah, we're not going to sit back and watch it all fall apart. Not with good folks like you doing the heavy lifting. Hey, let's not even take a break. Mark, you and Jeremy swap places if you don't mind. We're informal here. Name of the damn thing is No Stoplights. I mean, how formal can you be in a podcast named No Stoplights? Thank you, Jeremy. Appreciate that. Okay, Mark, you come from politics. I come from politics. There's a lot of ambiguity. I'll use a technical word. There's a lot of squishiness in American politics. Ideology, philosophy, vote getting, blah, 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 blah. You talked about Bernie Sanders a second ago. The one truth in all of life is 2 + 2 = 4. You're the money man. I mean, you're responsible for Jeremy is negotiating with the players and dealing with the coaches. You're on the trail trying to raise money. You and I have a friend. He says money's the answer. Now, what's the question? In politics, I've always said follow the money. Not some of the time, not most of the time, but rather all of the time. When you and Jeremy accepted this challenge, excuse my French, you ready, Baptist? We didn't know our ass from third base. I mean, we really and truly were building something literally from scratch. We were at the very beginning of that. Where are we today? How much better do you feel about Garnet Trust today than you did, a year and 3 or 4 months ago? Am I pretty close to accurate?
You're close to accurate on the timeline. As far as where I feel, I mean, we are leaps and bounds better. I mean, we've got a little bit of cash in the bank, and we got a program to keep selling and trying to get that message to people. And we didn't know. I mean, when I started this job, so Jeremy was a little bit ahead of me, but I started this job in January of 2023, a year ago this month. I mean, I knew where my next event was going to be, but I didn't know what the long-term plan was. We had to develop that long-term plan, and we have. And I feel comfortable with where we're headed. Could we always do better? Absolutely. And Jeremy was spot on about that. But I feel great about the buy-in that we've gotten. I mean, before football season this year, I would argue that 90% of a common Gamecock fan probably didn't know what Garnet Trust was, or if they knew what it was, they didn't know exactly what they did. I mean, we spent time advertising at games. We spent time on radio shows. We spent time, using the players to get our message out. If you are a Gamecock fan in January of 2024 and you don't understand Garnet Trust, a little bit of it's on you at this point. I mean, I dedicated 2023. Obviously, we had to raise money. We had to keep players. We had to make sure we took care of the guys that were on our roster at South Carolina. But 2023 was about education, and it was about making sure that Gamecock fans across the state and across the country understood the importance of NIL at South Carolina and the importance that Garnet Trust was a part of that equation. Now, it's if you're not part of the solution, you're part of the problem, and you understand that.
Okay, let's go down this road for a second with you. I think Jeremy agreed with me that it's different in the SEC. I mean, it just means more. That's their marketing slogan. But the reality is, once Oklahoma and Texas get into the league, I mean, it raises the bar. I mean, it really and truly does. Is that daunting? Is that intimidating? Do you welcome that challenge? Should the Gamecock Nation be told clearly and plainly that if we don't keep up, we get left behind? I mean, Mark, the concern that I have, and you and I have had off-the-air conversations, you got to ask the fan base to do more without insulting the fan base. And that's a hard needle to thread.
Yeah, absolutely. But to answer your first question, you damn right I welcome the challenge, right? I mean, that's what we joined the SEC for. We didn't join the SEC to get more TV revenue. We didn't join the SEC so that you could be a part of this prestige. It just means more conference. You join the SEC so you can compete with the big dogs. And I've heard a saying from a long time ago that if you can't run with the big dogs, you might as well stay on the porch. And as a fan base, we've got to make that decision. You're either going to run with Texas, you're either going to run with Alabama, or you're going to sit on the porch, right? And I hope that Gamecock fans, are listening whenever they hear this podcast or watching that they've got to make a decision that we're not going to sit on the porch.
Do you understand, not the complaint, but do you understand from the donors and the season ticket holders, look, man, I'm doing all I can. It seems like the university should be partially responsible for paying or compensating or NIL, the deal they make with the players. You're asking me for more and more, and I only have so much. You hear that a lot. I hear that a lot. There may be a new model on the other side of today. I mean, there's legislation pending, that there are a lot of nuanced debates being had around NIL. But right now, the only way to fund NIL is the fans' commitment.
That's right. I mean, and that's the way that, and my argument back is everyone else is doing this too, right? I mean, yes, absolutely. Jeremy specifically does a great job of exploring other revenue streams. It's not sustainable long-term to be competitive for any school, not just South Carolina, if you just keep relying on donors, because eventually you're going to have a bad season and some of that money is going to dry up or whatever it may be, right? But yes, absolutely, we are going to the same people asking for a little bit more money. But as Jeremy said earlier, I'm asking the person that is investing $150 to go watch South Carolina play Texas A&M, and I'm asking them for another $50 so they can put a competitive product on the field.
Do you believe in the Bernie Sanders model?
I don't believe in it solely, and I think it works differently at different places. At South Carolina, I think it has absolutely got to be part of our recipe, right? I mean, our goal is to have 5,000 people that are giving $25 a month.
Look at the camera and say that.
I need 5,000 people to join Garnet Trust and give $25 a month. I mean, that's $1.5 million of sustainable revenue that I can count on no matter what that is coming in on a recurring basis. And that's just for the people that give. That's just if only people gave $25 a month. And there's a level that you can give $100 a month. There's a level that you can give $1,000 a month. There's a level that you can give $10 a month if that's all you can afford. And I tell people this all the time. There is a spot for every single Gamecock fan. I don't like, you bring it up. I'm going to the people that, they say, well, I spend money on tickets and tailgating and popcorn and everything else that comes along with going to a South Carolina sporting event. If you're doing it, you can afford $10 a month. You're going to go to Starbucks and spend $10 tomorrow morning on coffee.
When I hear complaints and criticisms, it leads normally with, well, I mean, we can't keep up with Texas and Texas A&M. We can't keep up with Ohio State and Michigan. Those are huge universities, tradition-rich programs, big alumni. Is there been an evaluation from your and Jeremy's perspective, or maybe the university's perspective? And I'm not saying, hey, what neighborhood are we in? Who should we compete with? But are there similar universities in our conference that we can use as benchmarks?
Yeah, there are absolutely similar schools in the conference that you can use as benchmarks from an NIL perspective. Missouri, Ole Miss, Auburn have all done outstanding jobs of getting their programs off and running.
And they're similar universities?
Absolutely. I mean, Alabama, Mississippi, Missouri's a little different. I mean, and I will say this, Missouri has Kansas City and St. Louis in their boundaries. There's
heavily populated metropolitan areas.
Heavy populated, heavy business, heavy industry, and it's the only state school, right?
But you would agree, I'm going to play devil's advocate for a second. We're going to get argumentative here on the podcast. You would agree that the Chiefs, the Royals, and the Cardinals also kind of take away some of that money, entertainment
they take away
dollars.
Some of the money, but that is still their college, right?
Okay.
If I grew up in suburban St. Louis, and my dad worked at Anheuser-Busch, and I went to the University University of Missouri, and I went back and I worked for Edward Jones, or I went to Kansas City and worked for a big corporation out there. I mean, I might go to the Chiefs fans and spend a bunch of money pulling for Patrick Mahomes, but I'm still going to be a Missouri Tiger, right? And that's a little bit different than we have in South Carolina. And in South Carolina, you're either Tiger or you're a Gamecock. But there, you're only you're an MIZZOU. And that makes them a little different. And the second thing is, and I'll talk about this for a second. I mean, there are a lot of schools that have in the Midwestern part of the country that have heard all in all about how great the SEC is. Well, for a lot of those states, they are the closest school. They're the closest SEC school. Ohio, Illinois, Indiana, Minnesota, Nebraska. I mean, and you and I are not. I mean, Ohio State can't get all of them. Notre Dame can't get all of them. Minnesota, Nebraska, Iowa, they can't get all of them. So you all of a sudden you take the confines of Missouri and you take every talent there, because you got the two of the largest 30 cities in America that are there, and then you start cherry picking a few from Iowa, a few from Nebraska, a few from a couple big guys from Minnesota that grew up on cornfields. All of a sudden you got a pretty good offensive lineman.
Walk me through, because you've shared this with me off the air and share as much of this as you're comfortable with. I think it surprised you at how many alumni of South Carolina were living in places other than our native state, our home state. You've got to deal with a sports bar in New York City that I find so interesting. Tell us much of that as you're comfortable with.
Yeah, I mean, so we realize that, listen, South Carolina is South Carolina. It's the fastest growing state in the country. But there are a lot of people that are connected to South Carolina in more ways than just that they went to school there or their kids went to school there, whatever it may be. And there are places, D.C., New York, Dallas, Chicago, Miami, Florida. I mean, there are a ton of places, and it's almost a little bit like recruiting, right? Coach Beamer has done a really good job of trying to locate these talented guys and that's same model that Missouri has had in the Midwest, that we've had a little bit in North Carolina and Virginia. Hey, we're the closest. We're your closest school. We're a direct flight from D.C. we're a direct flight from New York to South Carolina, right? Those are places where it's easy for us to get to, and you got to go find some donors there, right? So we've got a deal with the Mason Jar, and we'll give the Mason Jar a shout out here. We might need to get,
they deserve it.
We might need to get Mickey Finn's to give them send them a case of liquor so they can serve some South Carolina alcohol at their
Rick will do
bar.
it, you know that.
Yeah, absolutely. And so we went up there for the Texas A&M game and had a Garnet Trust Gamecock Club Mason Jar co-branded event at their restaurant during the Texas A&M game this past year. Jeremy and I went up there, took our wives, had a great trip, and raised some money. I mean, there were some guys that were very serious about supporting South Carolina NIL that live in New York City, and the reality is it's almost more appealing for someone like that to do it because they grew up probably in the Northeast. They went to the closest SEC school. They wanted to go to a big-time football environment. They came down here, went to the Darla Moore School of Business, got a great a great degree in finance, went back to New York City. They're living on Wall Street and making a bunch of money, but they probably come to one game a year. They don't buy the season tickets. They might go to New York Jets games. They might go to Giants games. They come to one South Carolina game a year. The guys that own the Mason Jar come to one South Carolina game a year, but they love the Gamecocks and they watch every Saturday. What more of a way for you to impact your viewing experience than to say, hey, I give $100 a month to the Garnet Trust to make sure that we've got good players. And every now and then some of those players come up here. We had Spencer Rattler went to the Mason Jar in early December, took his girlfriend to New York City for the first time, and they went to the Mason Jar. Had and a couple other players from South Carolina that went this past week, finishing up their winter break, went up to New York City and went to the Mason Jar. So it's a great partnership that we have with the Mason Jar, and we're super excited for that. And we're gonna do an event with Coach Beamer in New York here in the spring.
Let's Jeremy and I were talking a second ago about the the newness of NIL, the traditional model of college athletics. You got an AD, you got a board, you got a president, you got all these positions that have been around forever. NIL shows up. And I got to believe the University Gamecock Club, the athletics department, are calling on people who have made contributions to the university. They were a little bit leery. I don't want to say suspicious. I think that's unfair. But they were nervous that this new apparatus that kind of complements football, basketball, baseball, and women's basketball, we'll get to that in a second, but you guys were fighting for the same dollars. Has that relationship become more compatible? I mean, there's always the yin and yang of I'm calling on behalf of Garnet Trust. I'm calling on behalf of the Gamecock Club. But do we have a little more seamlessness in that arrangement?
Absolutely. I mean, this was new. I mean, I was very fortunate to have a lot of good relationships with the folks that work within the athletic department before I started this job. I've been a loyal Gamecock for a long, long time. You know that, and I've seen a lot of these people and built friendships with a lot of those folks that work in the athletic administration. So it was never a ruffle my feathers type thing, but it was very much was this is new, and we got to get adjusted to this newness. And I mean, this new year is going to be totally different than what we even experienced in 2023. I mean, we're so thankful for the $1 million match. The university was very big and instrumental in helping us find that donor and also promoting the $1 million match program. We would have never been able to achieve that full match without the support from the University of South Carolina and the athletic department. And we're just continuing to work on that relationship moving forward.
Let's go back to our previous life. Mark shadowed me when I was lieutenant governor one day, and I was afraid that they were going to keep him and run me off. They ran me off. They just didn't keep him. Some of these states that have done extremely well with NIL have gotten their General Assembly involved. I, for one, believe we have to adopt some NIL legislation in our state. You and I have kicked the can on what that needs to be or what it doesn't need to be or who needs to bless it, who needs to sign off on it. Is that critical to the NIL being the essential part of building a winning program? How important is it for Clemson and South Carolina to sign off on an NIL legislation that makes life better and us more competitive in some of these states that have embraced NIL?
Part of, as we talked about earlier, part of being in the SEC is competing with the big dogs, and you've got to be unique in finding new ways to be competitive. And if that means we need to go to the legislature, then that means we need to go to the legislature. If that means that I need to kick open, if I need to start turning in aluminum cans just to make more money, that's what we got to do. We've got to kick every option open and see if it works, right? I mean, and I am a big believer that we got to test everything. And this is a new world for everybody. We're only in its third year. It's been in existence for 2.5 full years. And everybody's finding new things, out along the way. But yeah, absolutely. I think that legislative proposal, now what that looks like, I don't know exactly. I don't know that any of us know really. But find out something that works for us, and obviously within the state of South Carolina would have to benefit Coastal, Clemson, and South Carolina as far as Division I football programs. But we got to make sure that we're testing every option.
Mark, who holds you and Jeremy accountable? Who makes sure you're doing the job that you say you're doing? I mean, I know there's a board in place. There was a recent purchase, but I mean, I think people who are concerned about the newness of it. I don't know, Mark. I don't know, Jeremy. I love the Gamecocks, but there's some questions I have. Who holds you guys accountable? Who makes sure you're doing right by the student athlete, the fan, and the university?
I think it's a little bit of everything above, right? I mean, there is a board that I answer to. There's a group of owners that I answer to. Send them quarterly reports, have monthly board meetings, those kind of things that we talk about with those folks. A lot of phone calls in between with all those people as well. But I mean, I think it's a little bit of the university as well. It's the players that hold us accountable, right? I mean, if I'm not making my payments to the guys, you're going to hear about it on social media or from them or whatever it may be. And it's fans that hold us accountable, right? I mean, sometimes fans say, "Hey, I want my donation to go to women's basketball. Hey, I want my donation to go to football, whatever it may be." And a lot of it is the coaches to make sure that I am providing them. My job every morning when I wake up is to provide the resources to our athletic coaches to make sure they have the tools to be successful. And if they don't have the tools, you best believe that you will probably hear about it.
There comes times in all of our lives we tip our hat to our competitors, to our foes, to our mortal enemies at times. My observation, and you guys live it, you breathe it, you eat it, you sleep it, you must. It's your job. You got to be successful. But it seems to me that Missouri and Ole Miss were two programs that embraced NIL. And because of embracing NIL, excelled on the football field. Right or wrong?
No, I think you're right, and I will point out. I think both of them have done it a little bit two different ways. Ole Miss has very much embraced the transfer portal. I mean, their recruiting ranking, true high school recruiting, is actually ranked below South Carolina. But they went heavy into the transfer portal. That's kind of been their mentality that they want to embrace. Missouri, in part for their state law of keeping guys in state, they've still got great high school recruiting, and they've supplemented with transfer portal. So it's a little bit of a two different approaches, right? One is transfer portal heavy a little bit. Still some great athletes that they recruited out of high school that Coach Kiffin has done at the University of Mississippi. At Missouri, I mean, they've trusted their recruiting. They went 6-7 back-to-back years before they went 10-2 this year. Last year, they only had one major deflection from their team, a guy named Dominic Lovett, who went to Georgia actually, and who really hasn't played a ton. But they replaced that with a transfer portal or wide receiver, Theo Wace from Oklahoma, who had a great game against Ohio State, and they've kind of built it that way. So it's NIL prominent, but it's two different ways to do it. And so I don't necessarily know which. We're going to find out a little bit more as time progresses, which one of those models is probably best. We saw A&M a couple of years ago in 2022. They went NIL heavy, but they went NIL heavy in the high school recruiting ranks. I mean, they signed 25 kids. They said each of them was going to make. I mean, they were throwing out numbers. Anywhere from $10,000 to $1 million, right? I mean, they were throwing out numbers, and they kind of promised those numbers to those kids that they didn't always back up on. But they were able to. But so they went all in on the high school ranks. Well, that didn't work. I mean, obviously, Coach Fisher lost his job. It didn't seem. There could have been other reasons for that it didn't work. But so there are a lot of different avenues for how you want to spend your NIL money.
Is it fair to say that the majority of programs that have been successful plug gaps with portal players? I mean, they find a deficient position. In other words, this 4-star receiver didn't work out. This 4-star receiver broke his leg, and we're all of a sudden thin at receiver. So instead of trying to recruit a freshman and hoping for the best, we'll go to the portal,
right? You
got and find a very serviceable player.
You got a ready-made player.
Who makes those decisions? I think contributors to NILs would be very interested in how we land on certain players in certain positions.
Yeah, I mean, and a lot of that is left up to Coach Beamer and their staff and Coach Paris and his staff.
So your and Jeremy's interaction with Shane on something like that looks like what?
I mean, listen, we went to the biggest priority that we had leaving the 2023 season is making sure that there were guys on our roster that we kept. There was a list of players that we.
And it looks to me, I'm interrupting you, but it looks to me like you guys made pretty significant investments in the O&D line.
Yes,
you felt there were quality players there that could be developed into really good players, and instead of allowing those kids to be enticed by the portal, you made investments to keep them here.
Absolutely, yes. I mean, and to be honest, there is not an offensive or defensive lineman who has been a significant contributor in the past that is leaving the University of South Carolina. And NIL is 100% part of that equation.
Who evaluates and brings you a player, and who assigns a value to that player? I just think so many people who are interested in making contributions would be interested in the logistics of that.
Yeah, I mean, it's a conversation that Jeremy and I have, on a daily, sometimes hourly, minutely basis. But we work with the coaching staff to figure out, we kind of understand what our generalized budget is. And, it's a little bit, okay, well, what do we value? And we talked about this, I think, on the last podcast. Okay, what do we value the starting left tackle? What do we value the starting right tackle? What do we value? What percentage of our budget? So if I go to someone and say, okay, your budget is $5 million, right? Then they say, okay, well, we're going to pay the starting left tackle 3%. Well, what's 3% of $5 million, right? We're going to figure out those numbers across the way. And I'm just, those are round numbers. I'm not using specifics,
sure.
but that's kind of a little bit of taking that a little bit of that NFL model. Now, I guess the argument is it's a little bit of a self-imposed salary cap. It is. But it's the self-imposed salary cap for everybody, right? I mean, some people are going to be raising $12, $15 million to spend on a football team. Some people are going to be raising, $2 or $3 million to spend on a football team, right? But you got to make the best with the resources you got to field a competitive program.
Do you take it personal when a kid transfers that you didn't think would? I mean, obviously, there's some kids just don't fit. I mean, they're good portal players. This kid came here, not as good as we thought he'd be. He's not going to be a major contributor. And then there's these other kids that you think you've got them in a good place. You think everything is the way it should be. And out of left field, they decide to transfer. I mean, kids are kids. I mean, they're not going to – I don't give a damn how much money we've got or how much legalities we put in place. A kid's going to be a kid. And you've got to be prepared for the kid being the kid. But do you take that personally?
I don't take it personally. I mean, I really don't. And as hard as there are some situations that I get frustrated about.
Frustrated would be a better word,
right? But I don't take it personal from the aspect that as much as people don't like NIL, I think this is the closest thing to preparing these kids for the real world as there ever was. I mean, there are a lot of times where I've been in a job position, I've got offered another job that I had to weigh whether I was going to take it or not, right? And, sometimes the grass isn't always greener on the other side. Sometimes you think it is, and sometimes it is greener on the other side. Sometimes it might be that you want a different work environment instead of and you're willing to offset the pay for that. I mean, there are so many different, and I think as fans, we have to realize that, right? If you own a construction company and your guy leaves for the guy down the street, well, I mean, there are a lot of things. Is it different hours? Is it different pay? Is it different benefits? Is it different, work-life balance? I mean, there are so many different things that take in that consideration. But then all of a sudden when we come to college football, we're like, oh, well, they have to be locked in for 5 years or 4 years or whatever the number is. I mean, this is the real world. Now, I guess the reality of that is there have to be some guidelines that contractually obligate some of those guys for a period of time or punishment, I guess, a buyout or whatever it may be if they leave, right? I mean, yeah, a coach can leave anytime he wants to, but there are penalties for him leaving. Right now, there's not a penalty for a guy leaving.
Is it the Wild West? I mean, you wake up every day feeling like you're settling the West. You're Lewis and Clark. You don't know what's out there, but whatever comes your way, you got to deal with. Because it is, to some degree, the Wild West.
It is, but the Wild West is me dropping a brown paper bag of cash off at some kid's back door and hoping that he comes to South Carolina.
That never happened. Stop accusing teams of that. You know that never happened. This is the first time we've ever paid college football players to play football. Yeah,
that's the Wild West, right? I mean, this is contracts. This is negotiations. It's just new. That's what it is. It's not It's not the wild. It might be the Wild West of Lewis and Clark. It's not the Wild West of the Cowboys and Indians a little bit. You know what I mean? And so where there are no rules.
So and this is kind of a weird way to ask the question. I mean, when you look at Texas and Texas A&M, I mean, up through the ground come a bubbling crude. I mean, that's kind of a different animal. I mean, they raise as much as they have to raise, and they'll continue to raise as much as they have to raise. I mean, I'm not asking you what our budget is. I don't want you to disclose any of that. But how do we decide what our number is to go compete with Georgia, to go compete with Tennessee, to go compete with LSU? We'll never raise as much as Texas and Texas A&M, but hell, nobody else in America will. I mean, we're in a bigger boat than they are. But how do we decide what our number needs to be and how do we get there?
Yeah, I mean, the biggest thing is we work with the coaches to figure out what they feel like their needs are, right? I mean,
but they're learning as well, Mark.
Absolutely, they're learning. I mean, and so a little bit of it's a guess, right? I mean, you learn what's a good value, what's a bad value. I mean, and there's some give and take in that. But listen, I mean, I'll say it publicly. We need to raise somewhere between $7, $8, $9 million a year across the school to give ourselves a fighting chance. I mean, you're going to see some of these numbers that are thrown out from other schools. Some of that is over a period of time. You know, I mean, you'll see. I think Auburn, has said it. They've raised $20 million. Well, that might not be $20 million cash on hand, right? I mean, that might be over a 4-year commitment. Well, then that would only be $5 million a year, right? We need to raise somewhere between $5 and $10 million is what I think is the answer for us to be competitive across school-wide on a competitive basis. I think we can give our coaches the resources they need with that amount of money.
The one thing politicians at times forget to do is ask for the vote. You get caught up in these speeches about the economy and taxes and, voting rights and immigration and whatnot, and you fail to ask people to vote for you. I don't want you to fail at making sure our listeners, viewers, however many they are, wherever they are, understand how important it is to be a member of Garnet Trust, how essential it is to help you meet that number, and how they can find out more, how they can be a part of this team. I guess I'm giving you the equivalent of asking someone to vote for you. But this is, to me, and I'll say it, not because Jeremy and Mark's in the room, to me, if you get this wrong, you lose, period. If you get it right, there's a chance you win. And I think getting it right is essential. And I do believe this, Mark, as a longtime Gamecock fan, and you've heard me yell and scream and cuss, and I won't go into that. I think this is a reset of college football. I think the tradition Alabama has, the tradition Ohio State has, it matters. It always will matter. But this is our chance as Gamecock Nation to play catch up in a hurry if we commit ourselves to NIL. How can people find out more, and how can they make a contribution?
Right, well, I'm gonna be a true politician. One, they never forget to ask for money. Politicians never forget to ask for money. They might forget to ask for the
vote. Well, I'll agree with that.
They don't forget to ask for money.
Send me a check. Vote for me.
But I will very much ask for money. But I want to get there via a story. And I've said this before, and we didn't know. I think the last time we talked with the championships, the conference championships had not happened yet, so we weren't sure how the bowl setup was going to be, all this kind of stuff. When was the last time that Michigan played for a national championship?
27 years ago?
It was 1997, right?
Okay.
The last time that Washington played for a national championship was 1991, right? So over almost 30 years for both those programs that have not been irrelevant. They've been on the scene, but they have not competed for a national championship in nearly 30 years for both schools, right? That's the first time that what I would call a newbie has made it to this level in a long, long time, right? Georgia had not won a national championship in 41 years before they won it. They had been on the scene. Clemson they had not won a championship for about 40 years before they won one. They had been on the scene for the previous decade. But you talk about a reset for college football. How many fans do you think you would have asked on Saturday afternoon Monday afternoon before those games kicked off if Alabama or Texas wouldn't be in the national championship?
Very few.
This is a chance, especially in this part of the country. This is a chance for teams that have, people say, well, this is going to further separate the haves and have-nots, and I don't think that could be further from the truth, Ken. This is a chance for the have-nots to take a stand, for Missouri to beat Ohio State in the Cotton Bowl, for Ole Miss to win their first 11-win season ever. And so I think that it just goes back further to the pitch. I mean, that for Gamecock fans, if you want to win, I mean, this is your chance to buy in. And if you want to be a part of building something special, and don't get me wrong, we've got great facilities, we've got great fans, we've had terrific buy-in from our fan base across the board. This is just the next step.
But we've had mediocre success.
We have
great fans, unbelievable facilities. Mediocre success.
Well, guess what doesn't breed mediocre success? Great players. And how do you get and retain great players in today's world? It is NIL. It is GarnetTrust.com. Go to Garnet Trust, sign up today. You can join for as little as $10 a month. If you're interested in making a contribution a larger to the Garnet Trust Foundation, it can be 100% tax deductible. Email me at mark@garnettrust.com. Please get in touch with us because, listen, if you want to compete, this is the way to compete.
You stuck the landing, my man. You asked for the vote and the money. Thank you, Mark.
Thank you, Ken.
And thanks to Jeremy. Thanks to both of you guys for what you do. As a loyal and longtime Gamecock fan, I want to win. I wondered if I was going to live long enough to ever see success on the football field. I feel a little more optimistic. I mean, I do feel like that this is a new model of college football. I mean, it's our opportunity. I mean, we'll decide to take a pass or we'll decide to invest, and I hope we make some serious investments. I do believe, and I think Mark and Jeremy believe this, there's other changes coming. I mean, there'll be other tweaks coming down the pike, but it is what it is right now. And if Gamecock fans are serious about competing, they'll figure out a way to fund this NIL Garnet Trust so that we can retain and acquire the players to compete with the big boys of college football. Want to once again, and I know you do as well, I want to thank Rick Havakalls and Mickey Fins. Once again, big variety, a large selection, normally more expensive. Not a big variety, not a large selection, normally on the cheap. Rick has figured out a way to have the best prices on the largest selection and the best quality, and I know he's a good friend of yours and a supporter of Garnet Trust.
He's been a great supporter of Garnet Trust, a great supporter of the University of South Carolina. I think this will be Jeremy's first stop at Mickey Finn's one-stop party shop, so I can't wait to just take him by there whenever we leave here.
And that's a wrap. Thank you, my man.
Thank you.